Good morning, Chair Vollendroff, members Garrett and Holmes, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Good morning. Thank you, Gretchen, and welcome to the Board Caucus meeting for Tuesday, March 25th. We will start this morning's meeting with a legislative update with Mark Webster. But Mark, before you do that, I just want to take a moment to recognize and acknowledge the passing of former Speaker of the House, Frank Chop, who passed away on Saturday, and just recognize his contributions to the state of Washington. So I just felt like I wanted to do that before we kicked off our meeting today. So thank you, Mark. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, good morning, Chair Vollendroff and members Garrett and Holmes. It is day 72 of session, basically 1 month to go. Not really sure how I feel about that, but that's what we've got going. Yesterday, the operating budget proposals from both the House and Senate fiscal chairs were released. Despite billions in new revenue, I think most agencies are looking at some cuts, and the LCB is included in that. Neither budget funded phase 3 of LEADS, and only the Senate budget funded the tax and fee system. Both took some vacancy savings, and the Senate would implement furloughs. Both budgets also implement a form of wealth tax or intangible assets tax on stocks, bonds, and other assets. The House and Senate differ in the mechanics of those proposals, but both budgets do rely on that new tax. I've just come from the House Finance Committee to testify on House Bill 2037, the out-of-state investment bill. Both we and the Attorney General's office have some concerns related to the ongoing litigation before the Ninth Circuit on this topic and the potential impacts to the social equity in cannabis program so close to the opening of that second application window. In a few moments, we'll head over to the Labor and Commerce Committee, who is hearing the outdoor alcohol service, the kind of World Cup bill, House Bill 1515, the dashboard bill for the LCB, 1066, and the contract kitchens bill, 1602. They're also going to finish the hearing on the license fee increase bill. The Senate one is 5786 that they kind of ran out of time on yesterday. And so I'll get to that one in a minute. The Senate will take up the House's social equity and cannabis bill 1551 on Friday. The House has already heard Senator Saldana's buffer zone bill that reduces the buffer between cannabis retailers to no more than 250 feet. And there's some talk of amendments on that. So it's interesting to see that the House is kind of digging into that policy change and potentially looking at it favorably. Both House Bill 1551, the kind of social equity bill in the House, and the dashboard bill task the LCB with new work and don't provide funding for them. That's kind of raised the ire of the governor's office, and obviously it's not our preferred approach either. But to be clear, the bills both have some important aspects. So as you'll remember, 1551 initially proposed pausing the social equity window, which was problematic, but that provision is gone. And in its place is language amending the Department of Commerce's statute on who can receive the technical assistance grant funding. Now, that is important to potential licensees. Similarly, 1066 tasks us with standing up additional dashboards that, you've seen some of those from our amazing research team. It'd go further because it wouldn't only be our own data, but data from partners like the Department of Health and the Healthcare Authority. I think the bill is trying to say that nobody needs to do new work, but kind of point to or use what they're already collecting. It isn't clear though, and so I think our partners may have some concerns, and we'll see if those can get worked out. Recently, the House and Senate dropped bills, as I mentioned, that would increase the fees for most all of our licenses, permits, and endorsements. That's House Bill 2035 in the House, and as mentioned, 5786 in the Senate. So the Senate is hearing that one today. House Appropriations Committee heard 2035 last week. Supporters point out that the fees were set in statute in 1997 and haven't been touched since. Opponents include most all of the alcohol stakeholders and the hospitality industry. I think as far as what it would raise, we calculate that at around $8 million per year. So I will stop there and see if there are any questions.
Any questions?
No questions.
Mark, I just have one quick question about the fee increase. Is that fee increase across the board equitable? I'm like, how is it distributed? Is it large, small, everybody gets it? How is the proposed fee increase structured?
Great question. It's pretty darn simple. It is a 50% increase on all fees, pretty much across the
Okay, so
board.
it doesn't matter the size of the place
No.
or okay.
No,
And it
50%.
definitely impacts certain businesses more than others. So just
Absolutely.
pointing that out.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the update and the fine work. Appreciate it. All right, moving right along, we have our policy and rules team update. And first up, we have Jeff, who's going to give us an update on rules petition review and consideration for permanent resident cards as acceptable forms of identification. So Jeff, you're up.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Vollendroff and board members Garrett and Holmes. At tomorrow's board meeting, I will present the director's office response and a recommendation to the board regarding a rulemaking petition from Mr. Ole Michelson, a member of the public. Mr. Michelson's request is for the LCB to amend the current rules on acceptable forms of identification to include U.S. permanent resident cards, or green cards, as they're known, for customers who purchase or consume alcohol or purchase cannabis. This request would involve amending two different WAC sections, WAC 314.11.025 for alcohol and WAC 314.55.150 for cannabis. As it happens, the LCB is already in rule development around these around the issue of acceptable forms of identification, and we are considering how to make changes to these same two WAC sections. The board filed a CR 101 already to announce rulemaking back on October 9th, 2024, and the LCB has held two public meetings so far on this issue of acceptable forms of identification. Right now, we are considering language revisions to current rules. Because rulemaking work is already underway for these two WAC sections, it is not necessary to start a separate rulemaking project to consider adding additional forms of identification to these rules. For this reason, the director's office tomorrow will recommend denial of the petition for the reason that work is already going on to update these two rules and to consider other forms of identification, such as the resident card. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions now about the petition or the response.
Thank you, Jeff. I've seen no questions. Appreciate the update.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, and next we have Justin Nordhorn up on board adoption of CR 103 to implement cannabis sampling.
Good morning, Chair Vollendroff, members Garrett and Holmes. So today I am going to preview a request for tomorrow. The director's office is going to be requesting the board approve a CR 103, which is the final rules related to cannabis sampling. If approved tomorrow, the final rules will be filed immediately and be effective on April 26th. So the rulemaking started off with a petition from the Washington Cannabis Business Association that the board accepted in August of 2022. And this was to amend WAC 314.55.096 regarding samples. And these samples, just for clarification, are samples between the producer, processor, and the retailer. This is not addressing any type of samples to the general public. The CR 101 was filed in March of 2023, and stakeholder engagements were held in March and October of 23. Also, a survey was sent out to licensees in July of 23. And so the CR 102 was filed in August of 2024, making a variety of rule changes. And a public hearing was held in October of 24. So following the October public hearing, the rules team reviewed all the oral feedback and the written comments during the formal public comment period. And as a result, we had further engagement with licensees and stakeholders related to the changes that they had requested during the formal public comment period. That resulted in the creation of a supplemental CR 102, which was filed on January 29th of this year. So after working with the industry, public health, and others, No public comments were received or submitted after the supplemental CR 102 was filed or during that subsequent formal public comment period ending on March 12th. So no comments were received at the March 12th public hearing. And therefore, the rule language that you're being presented tomorrow is the same as the supplemental CR 102. So I'll go into a few more details tomorrow, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have today.
Great. Thank you, Justin. I'm seeing no questions, so appreciate it. And we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. All right, moving right along, we're at item board efficiency follow-up. And so I'll start the conversation, first of all, by thanking our constituents and licensees and associations and everybody for the feedback that we've received so far. And as we said last week, and board member Garrett, this is, you weren't here last week, and following our board meeting, I wanted to hold off on moving forward with the proposed efficiencies until we could have a conversation here today, given the feedback that we received. And we received some really good feedback and gave me some things to stop and think about and to consider. And as we can't speak to one another, I'm assuming you also have received feedback individually. And so I would like to pause enough to have more of a conversation about each of the proposed items and get your feedback and make some decisions based on that feedback. I also want to, I've heard a narrative of the board members not fully understanding what was asked of them. And that's the last thing I want to do. The last thing I want to do is create an environment where board members have voted on something, but not necessarily understood what they were voting on. And so I want to just make sure and give you the space to address that. If in fact you feel like I have created that space, I apologize for that, but I just want to make sure that that narrative that's out there, that one, I know about it if it is in fact the case, and two, if it's not, that we correct that narrative. So we'll start the conversation, and board member Garrett, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was copied on a email that went to the legislators implying that, which was very confusing to me for someone to think that we were voting on something that we didn't understand what we were voting on. Everything to do with the efficiency has been discussed for months coming from the director's office and our one-on-one with the director's office. I fully 100% support the vote that we gave you the okay to make these recommendations coming from the director's office. But these discussions with the director office has been going on for months and things. And I think one of the things, even in the discussion, my one-on-one with the director's office, was to hold out until we had a full board and things, but been discussing these things for months. And when I read what I'm reading in emails without substantial discussion and without ensuring that all board members fully understand what they were voting on, we have one-on-ones with the director office and with the director weekly. So I just don't know where these perceptions are coming from. I didn't feel that way. Pete, did you feel that way?
I think the last caucus meeting where we discussed this, my newness was evident. And, for instance, explaining the emergency management team. So I suspect that might have been the source of confusion, but I actually feel pretty up to speed now. The only thing I would like a little more discussion, just some clarity about when there will be opportunities, the remaining opportunities for public comment in rulemakings and the like. And in particular, board member Garrett, your suggestions about revisiting the advisory groups. So anyway, I suspect if anyone watching the last caucus could see, my confusion, for instance, over the executive management team meetings, which was I just attribute to being the newest member.
Well, that's good. Well, thank you for that. It's helpful to understand just so that I make sure that I create an environment that's inclusive and that everybody feels like we can voice our opinions and thoughts about the efficiencies that are proposed. So with that, what I would like to do is talk about some of the feedback that we received. Again, I'm not privy to the feedback that you've individually received. Some things I see all of you copied on, other things I've just been sent, so I don't know if people are individually sending you things as well. But there were a number of things that were brought up that I think bear further conversation that I'd like to propose. As we discussed, the board has given me the authority to move forward with the implementation, and that's my plan, is to move forward with the implementation. But before I do that, I would like to propose some potential amendments or at least some structural things that I think we should take into consideration. So one of the things that's been brought up is as we transition from oral communication and to written communication at the board meetings, there's been a request that we post the written comments that we receive. And I think that that's fair. I think that that's the only way. And it was actually always my intention that we do that. But I want to, one, see if you guys concur with that, and two, see if you've got any difference of opinion on that. But my proposal is that we would accept written comments and we would post those written comments. And I've talked with Gretchen about how we would do that. And what we would do is we would post them along with the meeting material that is posted once we're done with the meeting. So we've got all of the agenda, we've got the all of the attachments for that particular meeting, and we've got all of the comments would be posted as well. So I'll stop with that and ask if there's any comments or thoughts about posting the written comments that we receive as a part of our board meetings.
I agree with that. I don't see any problems with that.
Agreed.
Okay. Okay. The second thing is in terms of transition from weekly board meetings to monthly. I had originally intended that we would start that at the end of March. At the end of March with today's meeting, that this would be our last monthly. But in talking with the rules team, I also said these were all proposed and that a lot of these decisions would be based on the needs of our rules team and the workload that they have. And so given the workload of the rules team, my proposal is that we have 2 more board meetings in the month of April, that we meet on April 9th and we meet on April 23rd, and that we transition to monthly meetings beginning with the May 7th board meeting, and then they would be monthly thereafter. So I'll stop with that and see if you've got any feedback or any additional concerns that you heard from the community or stakeholders about the transition from biweekly to monthly board meetings. And if you concur with the potential schedule that I just proposed.
I'm good with the schedule, and I think I was reading something in one of the emails that on policy things that it was no longer before the full board, and I didn't detect that at all. That once it gets to the CR 103, everything would come before the full board. And I don't know if folks are aware that we have one-on-ones with the policy people throughout of what's going on and what's going to be presented to all of us and things like that. So the communication coming from policy doesn't go away. And there is nothing saying that the policy hearings was no longer going to be before the full board. So I'm okay with that.
Okay.
What you're proposing.
Board Member Holmes?
Yes, I'm in support of your proposal. That sounds like a reasonable schedule.
Okay, so the next thing related to the board meetings is the transition from oral comments to written comments. And my proposal is that we proceed with that. And I have I had staff send out a notice saying we will remain open to oral comments through tomorrow's meeting. So tomorrow at our meeting, as we normally have, and that's a change from our original communication, because my plan had been to make that transition effective with tomorrow's meeting. But given the feedback, I decided to extend that by one more meeting. So my plan is tomorrow we would allow oral comments, and starting with our April 9th meeting, we would transition to written comment. So I want to make sure that you guys are both on board with that and you concur with that decision.
I concur.
I concur.
Okay. All right. Now I will transition on to executive management team. We received a lot of feedback about executive management team, and I after hearing all of the feedback, concur with the recommendation that we continue executive management team in its current format for right now. And I say for right now because I believe that what I'm hearing is that participation by the community is important, and I concur with that. I think that having the EMT structure where people can still listen in is a structure that I think we should consider keeping in place. I think that where I would like more discussion about executive management team. I think executive management team, from my perspective, still could be improved. And the idea of council meetings, or I can't remember if that's the right term. Pete, what did you just call them? Anyway, there's another, anyway. Are they council meetings, board member Garrett? Is that the official term of the previous meetings that we had with different groups?
You mean when I was saying EMT used to be more structured?
Yeah, well, I'm talking about those groups that were led by board members.
Oh,
with
the advisory
advisory.
Right.
That's what it is. I
Yeah.
was calling them
That's
council. It's
right.
advisory. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a structure where we could somehow think about the executive management team and the council meetings, advisory meetings in a different way. So anyway, I want to open that up and find out, first of all, if you've received feedback about the executive management teams at meetings and what your thoughts are about the current structure and moving forward with executive management team. Board member Garrett?
So I think keeping it where all three board members are participating is great. I think with EMT, as I said, I think on the last caucus, it used to be more structured and tailored around conversation or division, that we, instead of a report out from all department or all directors, it was more tailored. So it could be that this particular month it's licensing, then it's enforcement, or it could be something, that has come up, but they were strictly structured meetings, not everybody just reporting out. The advisory council and EMT was two separate things altogether. So they were not put, combined. They were two separate things. Those advisory meetings could have been like quarterly. I think we were having maybe 3 a year, if that, and that was centered around breaking out lanes. So like I was cannabis and cannabis advisory, then we had the alcohol, then we had tribes. So we could come up, I think, with another name, because we now have a tribal liaison, that we just need to know what those three breakdowns would be. And we could talk about that, I think, in our one-on-ones with the director, but they were totally separate from EMT. So I don't want to confuse with what you're saying by making it like they were part of an EMT. It wasn't.
Okay.
And all three board members were at those meetings. So it was a public meeting. It was just being led by the board member that was over that topic or that advisory group at that time.
Okay, so that's really helpful background information. I didn't realize that all three board members, I knew that they were led by a particular board member, but all three board members were in attendance, and so therefore they are public meetings. Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Okay,
Yeah.
and I agree with keeping it separate from EMT and the structure of you're proposing around more presentations at EMT. Board Member Holmes, what are your thoughts about EMT and any feedback that you've received around the executive management team meeting and proposals?
Well, first, it sounds like I've received the same kind of feedback that you have, and that's why, for instance, I'm interested in the advisory committee function as a way of receiving public comment. But I don't think we should feel bound by the prior structure that Board Member Garrett's referring to. It's going to be new to me anyway because it predated me. But I do agree with the EMT structure you have going forward. Um, I'm ambivalent, frankly, about the structure of it. I'd like to actually see it in process, and I think that the nature of the discussion here has been that we can revisit these structures if we don't like how they're unfolding, or if we don't find them as useful or whatever. But I'm fine with the proposal going forward, and just like I said, would like to see more about the role that advisory committees could play.
Great. Board Member Garrett, anything else?
So,
Okay. Oh, go ahead. I'm going to then summarize what I think I just heard and make sure that we're all on the same page. We're going to continue to keep executive management team as it is now, on the same cadence as it is now, and we will, on our one-on-ones with the director, talk about how we move it towards more of a focused discussion during those executive management team meetings. And other than that, there will be no changes to executive management team at this time. The second thing I'm hearing, though, that we want to resume the advisory councils. And those advisory councils would be on approximately a quarterly basis, 3 to 4 times per year. They would be attended by all 3 board members, and they would be open to the public. And during those meetings, we would be able to engage, because the other theme that I heard in the feedback, which I think is a really valid piece of feedback, is that engagement with the LCB. And it was always the intention that we would bring back the advisory councils as part of this transition. I don't feel like I spoke about it enough after Board Member Garrett brought it up. But I think that bringing those back creates that space where we can have that kind of dialogue with the community. So,
yeah. And I'll reach out to Gretchen, because there was also structure we had put together, and I'm trying to think of the word for it, how they were formed, what it was based on. But there's a lot of work that went into establishing these, and the membership of these advisory meetings was based on someone from an organization that was part of this. It was not for individuals.
okay.
So we came up with a complete put together of the advisory council. And I want to say the bylaws, but it wasn't bylaws. There's another word for it, how everything was put together. But I'll get with Gretchen to go back and pull all of that information and ask her to send it out to all 3 of us.
That would be fantastic, because I looked this morning for historical documents and I couldn't find anything. So my plan was to talk with Gretchen, but if you
Yeah.
follow up with her and have her send it out because you know exactly what you're looking for, that would be
Right.
extremely helpful. And what I would propose is, in the spirit of Board Member Holmes' comment, that we come back and have a discussion here about the future. So here's what we used to do in these advisory councils, and here's what it could look like now. And maybe it will, in fact, remain identical. I don't know, but let's be open to a discussion about what those look like moving forward.
Great. And the
Okay.
whole point behind them. So I'm gonna go back, and I will probably, I'm sure I have emails from Dustin on that, but not lose focus of why they were created and the basics behind those.
Yes, and one thing,
Yeah.
I'll actually just put this out here as an early proposal, and that is the various lanes. We've got alcohol, we've got cannabis, and Board Member Garrett, you mentioned that we had a tribal, but now we've got a tribal liaison. And I work with Marla around liaisoning with the tribes, and so I'm wondering if we could consider a public health prevention potentially group. And so we would have a alcohol, a cannabis, and a public health as advisory council. So just something to throw out there as an early consideration. Okay,
All right.
any further conversation about EMT? And all right, feels like we're all on the same page. I want to back up just a little bit and go back to the board meeting conversation, because the other decision that we made, and Board Member Garrett, you touched on this in our earlier conversation just a bit, but I want to be very explicit about it. And that was, we talked about decoupling the public hearings from the board meeting. And there's been feedback around that. And I think, again, valuable feedback. But I think that there's also some assumptions based in the feedback, and that is that we are not necessarily going to be either one, attending those hearings that are separate from the board meeting, and two, that we're also not individually meeting with folks and have the potential to review recordings of those meetings so that we can see that testimony. So my proposal is that we still stick with decoupling the public hearings from the board meeting. And I want to make sure that you both concur with that, understand that. And if you've received additional feedback that would change that, I'm happy to hear that as well. So any thoughts about the decoupling of the public hearings from the board meetings?
And it's saying that we're saying the CR, the 101s and 102s,
Correct.
but the 103 still comes to the full board meeting.
They actually, at this particular point, everything still comes to the board meeting. We're just talking about the public hearing part of it
Right.
at this
Okay.
particular
Right.
point.
The public hearing piece.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I concur.
Okay. And Justin, are you on? I see your face there. Hey, thank you.
I am.
Hey, I just want to ask you quickly, are there any challenges from your perspective in terms of the board understanding, being informed? Like, I want to make sure that that I'm not missing anything in terms of our opportunity to still be fully engaged with this process, despite the fact that we've decoupled it from the board meeting itself.
Yeah, so anytime at any part of the rule process, there's always engagement with stakeholders. There's always an opportunity to do written comments, set up meetings, etc. The public hearing is just one component that basically is concluding the formal public comment period after the CR 102 has been filed. And so that will be recorded and published. And so all three board members would have the opportunity to review those at your convenience. And there is a requirement in the statute that the public hearings would be affording people the opportunity for oral public testimony. And so we don't answer any questions during those public hearings. Basically, the rules program would open up a public hearing, receive the feedback, and we would close the public hearing and have the recording available for viewing. And so that would be kind of the process of a public hearing. And then after that, any additional rule development moving into the CR 103 would certainly be coming back to the board. So you'll still be having updates, and you'll have those particular opportunities. And if we shift into this, I would think that the most effective or efficient way to run the public hearing would be virtual. So we don't have to expend more resources to manage the boardroom during a public hearing. And so folks would be able to either send in written comments, or they could schedule themselves to participate in the public hearing. And if somebody wanted to come in person, we could set up a computer so they could, come sit in front of the computer, testify, and then
Okay.
The next person. So we can adapt to that, but we would likely move it to that virtual environment. Everything would be recorded in the same manner.
Great, thank you. That's super helpful, and just wanted to make sure that we were all hearing the same thing in terms of what our ability to remain engaged in that process if we decouple that. So my proposal is that we move forward with decoupling the public hearing from the board meetings. So any comment, or I just want to hear from both board members whether you concur with that or not.
I concur.
I concur.
Okay, thank you. And Justin, can you stay on for just one more minute, because we're going to transition now to caucus meetings. And I want to keep you on, Justin, just so we can verify that the schedule that we have proposed meets the needs of the rules team in terms of their volume of work right now, as we transition from weekly caucuses to every other week caucus. And so the proposed change that I had submitted was moving from weekly caucus to every other week for caucus. And as it stands now, we would have our caucus on April 1st. We would have our caucus on April 8th. We would have our caucus on the 15th and the 22nd. And we would cancel the one on the 29th of April. And we would then transition to every other week starting in May. And so May 6th and May 20th would be our first month of transitioning to monthly, or excuse me, every other week, and then it would go every other week from there on. Now, Justin, when we talked the other day, I had talked about the board meeting being later in the month, and I hope you caught that it's actually earlier in the month. And so the caucus meetings would be toward the beginning of the month, and then 2 weeks later, and then thereafter. So I want to make sure that all board members concur with that schedule for the month of April, the transition in May, and then moving forward. And then Justin, if you've got any comments about how that fits with the rules team's needs and making sure that those two things align.
Yeah, so the caucus, that shouldn't be a problem for the rules team, because we're usually providing previews of what we're going to bring to the board before board meeting, or we're providing some sort of a rules update. And so the cadence of that every 2 weeks certainly works. I think what we had discussed on the board meeting side, the primary concern was around the rule petitions. We have a 60-day window to complete rule petitions. And if the board meetings aren't aligning that based on a once a month, or a board meeting gets canceled, we may need to call a special board meeting to be able to present that to the board so we can have meet our statutory requirements on the response and to those particular rule petitions. So that was the main thing on the timing of the meetings, because we have that one statutory component that's kind of starts off whenever the rule petition comes in. We can't control when that comes into us.
Okay, great.
And that's good. You just answered my question that we can, if needed, call special meetings.
I just want to make a little friendly amendment to that. I've had some conversations internally about, we wouldn't call special meetings, we would call additional meetings. And it's just a nuance in the wording.
Meeting, right.
Yeah, we can call additional board meetings or caucus meetings if we need to. The word special kind of has a different connotation to it, so we would call additional meetings if we needed to. Okay, any other comment? Okay, it looks like we're good there. I do want to point out, so I said we would keep the April 1st meeting because we have 5 caucuses already. We're going to cancel the last one in April. The April 1st meeting, we've kept it on the calendar if we need it, but as we always do, if we don't have agenda items for the 1st of April, we may cancel that meeting, but we've already got things on the 8th, the 15th, and the 22nd. So we definitely will have those 3 meetings in the month of April. Okay. I think that covers the things I have. Oh, go ahead, Justin. Looks like your hand is up.
Yeah, sorry, just one more comment. Just for planning purposes,
Yeah.
for those board meetings, if we do move into that monthly, just be prepared that there will be more requests for board actions in each board meeting. We've typically have separated those out, so it's just a few each meeting. But if we're doing them once a month, there will be longer meetings, potentially, for the rules team asking for approvals of the 101s, 2s, and 3s.
Yep, and I think we've all anticipated that. And in terms of the efficiencies that it creates, it's less preparation time and agenda building and staffing and all of those kind of things in between, recognizing that we may have longer meetings on the months that we have them. So that's great. All right. Thank you very much, Justin. I appreciate that. All right, I want to just conclude this part of the discussion with open comments. Anything else that you've received feedback on that you want to talk about amongst ourselves, or any decision that's been made? Or are we all good to go on the proposed changes? Okay. Pete, anything? All right, looks like we're good. I appreciate the conversation. The space that we have here, I want to continue to create an environment where everybody feels heard, everybody feels listened to, and I appreciate your contributions this morning. I also want to, again, one more time acknowledge the feedback that we received from the public. It is extremely important and valuable, and that spirit of partnership with the community and the licensees and associations is important. I think the LCB has had a strong history of that, and we want to maintain that. And I think our advisory councils are going to be a critical component of that moving forward. So I appreciate that. All right. Thank you. I'm closing this agenda item. All right, so we're at our last agenda item, and that is board member and executive assistant reports. So anything from the board? Okay, hearing none. Gretchen, Deb, any executive assistant reports?
Nothing, Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks very much, and I'll see everybody tomorrow. Have a good day.